Have you ever wondered if your generosity could harm your children? If you are about to retire and you want to give your children a good future, what would you do if I told you that there are 7 things you should never give them? The latest revelations will surprise you, but before we begin, I want you to pay full attention to this story because it is very important to understand the big lesson of this video. Eleanor, a recently retired woman who is passionate about helping children, planned to give them money and possessions, convinced that this was the best way to ensure their happiness. But before Elena could put her plan into action, her wise neighbor, Don Javier, issued a warning that surprised Elena. Many things are like overwatering a plant instead of helping it grow. It can suffocate. Maybe Elena's generosity was about to become a trap for her children. If you think these videos are worthwhile, before continuing, subscribe and click the bell to get updates. Elena. With a heart full of love and the best of intentions, she decided to give Carlos a large sum of money after he retired. "You can finally make your dreams come true," she told him excitedly. But what Elena didn't know was that she was about to begin a journey, a series of events that would change Carlos's life forever. Excited by this unexpected good fortune, Carlos decided to quit his job, wondered why he should work hard, and unknowingly fell into the trap of making quick money. It seemed like the blessing quickly turned into a curse. This phenomenon, known as the rich heir syndrome, is not as uncommon as you might think. In fact, it's so common that it even has a name in psychology. Dr. Roy Williams, author of Preparing Your Kids for $1 Billion, says that 70% of wealthy families lose their assets in the 2nd generation, and 90% lose their assets in the 3rd generation. But why does this happen? Imagine getting a giant cake every day. It's exciting at first, right? But over time, not only will you lose interest in baking, but it can also lead to a host of health problems. Money works in a similar way. Famous psychologist Abraham Maslow once said, "When all you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail." In Carlos's case, money was his new tool, and suddenly, every problem seemed financially solvable. He lost his ability to face challenges, grow, and find satisfaction in personal achievements. But as the saying goes, all is not lost. It's better to teach a fish to fish than to give it a fish. Elena could have taught Carlos financial skills, encouraged his entrepreneurial spirit, or even invested in a business together. These options would have not only provided him with financial assistance, but also offered him valuable life lessons. Philosopher Seneca warned more than 2,000 years ago about the dangers of wealth without wisdom. It is not those who have little who are poor, but those who want more. He said that Charles had a lot, but when he lost his goal, he became poorer than he had ever been. Are you thinking of giving your children a big gift? Before you do, ask yourself, am I giving them a safety net or a gilded cage? Am I giving them a stepping stone to achieve their dreams or a comfortable couch to rest their ambitions on? Remember that the real gift is not the money itself, but the means to create it. Increase it and spend it wisely. Tycoon Warren Buffett said, "I leave my children enough money to do something, but not enough to do nothing." Now let's move on to the talent real estate trap. Imagine the scene. Elena is recently retired and full of good intentions. She decides to surprise her daughter Anna with a gift that, at first, seems straight out of a fairy tale. "Darling, I want to give you our villa on the beach, and Anna is excited to see you enjoying long afternoons there." But what if this dream turns into a financial nightmare? As the philosopher Seneca once said, "It is not those who have little who are poor, but those who want much," and Anna was on the verge of wishing she would. Have you ever received this gift? What Elena did not receive. All I was thinking about were the hidden costs associated with this property, annual taxes, regular maintenance, unforeseen repairs. Suddenly the dream home became a bottomless pit, draining Anna's savings. But don't get ahead of yourself with this scenario. It's not as uncommon as you might think. In fact, recent studies have shown that inherited real estate is often a source of contention within families. I think the story of the Martinez family was a perfect example of this. They were a close-knit family until their grandfather died and they left their old house. What seemed like a gesture of love became a battleground. Who would pay for the repairs? Who would live there if they sold it? Family gatherings went from moments of joy to screaming and slamming doors. In the end, the property that was supposed to bring them together drove them apart. Don't get me wrong, transferring property is not inherently bad. The problems arise when we don't consider the bigger picture. Psychologist Abraham Maslow says, when all you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. In this case, the hammer is well-intentioned, but the problem is much more complicated than a single nail. The key is to provide financial education before transferring the property. The recipient is prepared to deal with it. He or she has the means to obtain it. He or she understands the responsibility that comes with it. He or she has considered the tax implications, retroactive to Elena and Anna. Imagine if Anna had simply given up Elena rather than the house. In the decision-making process, they could have considered their options: together sell the property and share the proceeds, establish a fund for its maintenance, or even make it a family business and rent out holiday apartments. Open communication and joint planning could have prevented this potential catastrophe. As the philosopher Epictetus wisely observed, wealth is not about having many possessions, but about having few needs and the opportunity for family growth. Perhaps the real gift is not the possession itself, but the lessons about financial responsibility and family communication that can be learned from such a situation. Back to Elena's story. Elena, with good intentions, was always there to solve any problem, from early scuffles at school to important decisions in adulthood. Elena was a superhero who came to the rescue. Sounds nice, but as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Turns out there is a name for this practice: helicopter parenting. No, we're not talking about parents flying around in fancy helicopters, which is pretty funny, but it refers to parents who are constantly hovering over their children's lives, always ready to land and solve any problem that arises. But now, what's wrong with being so attentive and kind? Imagine you're at the gym. Instead of teaching you how to lift weights, you have a personal trainer who lifts for you instead. You think you're gaining muscle. Of course, that's not the same way to solve all your children's problems. It robs them of the opportunity to use their emotional muscles and problem-solving skills. A University of Florida study revealed that young people raised by overprotective parents tend to have surprising. They find it even harder to cope with the stresses and pressures of everyday life. It's as if we've given them the cards to navigate life, but taken away their compass. When we returned to my friend Carlos, she began to notice something strange. Her eldest son seemed unable to make decisions on his own. When faced with difficulties at work, he cried out. Elena panics, while Anna avoids difficult situations, paralyzed with fear at the thought of moving alone or looking for a new job. And Roish, the youngest son and a new character in the story, grew up watching how his mother dealt with Carlos's crisis, despite his efforts to become more independent. Elena always found a way to help, even when she wasn't asked. Psychologist Alfred Oliva explains that overprotection may look like love, but is actually a fear that children will fail. However, failure and suffering are an essential part of learning and growing up. So what happens if we let our children crash into every obstacle? Not exactly, but the key is to find a balance like that. Philosopher Khalil Gibran once said that your children are not your children. Sons and daughters in life who crave for themselves, all we can do is to help them when they get into difficulties without overdoing it. First teach them how to ride a bike with training wheels, then hold the saddle, and finally teach them to pedal. Elena decided next time, when Carlos called her about a problem at work, to take a step back instead of giving a solution. He asked, "What do you think she should do to Anna?" She began to encourage her to take on small challenges and celebrate every small victory. As for Louise, let's see what happens later before continuing the story. If you liked this video, don't forget to click subscribe with a bell to avoid watching future videos. If you like this type of content as much as I do, comment, "I love these stories." By the way, please also comment on what you would like to see in this article. Next video I read all your comments. Let's continue to learn together and improve our lives. Are you ready to understand how the desire to help can become an invisible trap in family relationships? Our main character, Elena, after leaving her job, found herself in this situation without realizing it. Imagine Elena, with good intentions, showering her children with advice on every aspect of life, thinking she had all the wisdom in the world, wanting to share the wonder she received with them. "Louise, you should change jobs, Anna. How about you move closer, Carlos? This hairstyle doesn't suit you." Unknowingly building an invisible wall between her and her children, these short sentences. But why is unsolicited advice so counterproductive? Psychologist Dr. David Johnson explains. Maria Martinez. When we give unsolicited advice, we send a subconscious message that we don't trust the other person's decision-making abilities. Oops, that's not what Elena wanted to convey. The straw that broke the camel's back was when Louis became Elena's youngest son. The reason Elena was tired of constantly being told how she should live her life was to distance herself. Anna, the middle daughter, began to avoid calls from her mother, and Carlos, the eldest son, limited himself to monosyllabic replies. Elena realized something was going on when she started proposing. When she organized family dinners, only Carlos showed up. Carlos confessed that his brother avoided these meetings. What a slap in the face of reality. But all is not lost. Philosopher Epictetus once said that it is not things that bother us, but our judgments of things. Elena decided to apply this wisdom to her own situation and began practicing the art of listening without prejudice every time her children said something. She began to ask them how to think about it logically and what they think is best for them. Surprisingly, her children were asking for her more often. A University of Michigan study found that young adults whose parents respected their autonomy had higher satisfaction with their family and relationships. Elena is on the right path, she says. The key is to find a balance between being there for your children and respecting their ability to make decisions for themselves, as comedian Jerry Seinfeld sometimes says. Sometimes the best advice is to not give advice at all, says Elena, and she learned that children don't always need a written instruction book, but rather an ear and a shoulder to listen. She began to have deeper, more meaningful conversations with her children without feeling the pressure to solve everything right away. Have you ever wondered if your words are creating invisible gaps between your children? Imagine that. Every comparison is like a small stone. The protagonist, Elena, a retired woman, found herself in a situation that many parents would recognize, with her 3 children, Louise, Anna, and Carlos, who she believed were sharing their love and attention equally without realizing it. Louise, who fell into the trap of comparison, "Why can't you be more organized like Anna?" Elena often said that your brother, Carlos, already had a job when he was your age. These seemingly innocuous sentences sowed the seeds of resentment and conflict between the siblings. Psychologist Abraham Maslow once said that the healthiest way to raise children is to develop their individuality. Elena unwittingly did the exact opposite. Her constant comparisons undermined her children's self-esteem and created tension in family relationships. One family day at dinner, the atmosphere became tense as Elena compared her children again. Louise is always the same. Anna is perfect. Carlos is the success. And what about me, the loser of the family? The silence that followed was deafening. After years of giving everything for her children, she found herself in a situation many parents fear, one that is taken for granted. Does this sound familiar? Get ready, because what Elena will discover will change her life forever. It all started when her youngest son, Carlos, asked her if he could move into her house temporarily. "It will only take a few months, Mom," he said. Elena, with her heart of gold, agreed without hesitation. But those months turned into a year, and before she knew it, Elena was doing the washing, cooking, and cleaning for her 30-year-old son. As a result, Elena felt more like a maid than a mother. Where is the line between maternal love and abuse of trust? Philosopher Khalil Gibran once said, "Your children are not your children. They are sons and daughters in life who are showing themselves." But Elena was not the only one who found herself in this situation. A University of Michigan study found that 25% of retired parents experienced some form of financial or emotional abuse from their adult children. Psychologist Dr. Laura Markham explains that unconditional love does not mean being generous without limits. In fact, setting healthy boundaries is a form of love. Who would have thought? It turns out that saying no is also an act of love. Elena realized that her desire to help was actually stifling Carlos's growth. Famous psychologist Carl Jung once said, "The shoe that fits one person squeezes another." Elena was so busy trying to be the perfect mother that she didn't realize she was limiting Carlos's opportunities for growth. So what did Elena do? She decided to have an honest talk with Carlos. She explained that while she loved him unconditionally, she needed to set certain boundaries. Carlos's response was surprisingly positive. It turned out that he too felt trapped in this dynamic and didn't know how to get out of it. Together they devised a plan. Carlos would contribute to the household finances and do his own chores. Elena promised not to interfere with Carlos's decisions and to give him the space he needed to grow. The result was a healthier, more balanced relationship. Elena regained her confidence, their independence, and Carlos learned a valuable lesson about responsibility and autonomy. This experience teaches us a valuable lesson. True love requires setting clear boundaries. It's not about not loving and supporting your children, but doing so in a way that supports their growth and where their autonomy is greatly promoted. But despite your best efforts, have you ever felt like something was missing in your relationship with your children? Elena was about to discover that sometimes true wisdom can be hidden in the most unexpected places. Who would have thought that her neighbor, Don Aya, was hiding an ancient secret that would change the way you see things forever? Elena made a decision with a heavy heart and a head full of doubts. She crossed the street in search of advice and knocked on Don Javier's door. Her enigmatic neighbor, Don Javier, "I need your help," Elena said in a trembling voice, feeling like she was losing connection with her children. Don Javier invited her in with a bright smile. "Elena, you've come to the right place. Did you know that the ancient Stoics had a lot to say about raising children?" Elena blinked in surprise. What did the Stoics, the ancient philosophers, have to do with her? "A modern problem, right?" Don Javier continued. "The Stoics believed in the concept of non-attached love. It sounds contradictory, I know, but it's like holding a bird in your hand." Elena listened, fascinated. Don Javier explained how the philosopher Epictetus taught us that we cannot control what happens, but how we react to it. Think about it, your children are seedlings. Don Javier said, Your job is not to grow for them, but to create the right environment for them to grow on their own. But how can I see you facing difficulties? Elena Don Javier smiled. Marcus Aurelius once said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." When you let your children face difficulties, it's like you are vaccinating them against the difficulties of life. Elena looked thoughtful. Would you say they should stop helping them? Don Javier shook his head. No, Elena's stoic love is not cold or distant. It is love. Love that recognizes the individuality and responsibility of each person. It's like being the wind beneath the wings and not the pilot of the plane. Elena's mind was racing with these thoughts. She questioned everything she thought she knew about maternal love. Don Javier continued, Seneca taught us that the greatest wealth is to be content with less, and not to think that you are depriving your children of the satisfaction they have earned for themselves. Elena remembered a time when she had solved her children's problems, and in the process inadvertently robbed them of a valuable lesson. Can I start to change? She asked Don Javier, suggesting that the next time your children come to you for help, he should start with small steps, asking them what you think they should do, instead of solving their problems for them. You will be amazed at what they are capable of. As Elena was preparing to leave, Don Javier gave her some final advice. Remember, Elena, true love is not possessive. It is like the sun. It shines for everyone, but Elena was at a crossroads. After years of giving everything for her children, she realized that a radical change was necessary. Filled with determination, she made a plan to change not only her life, but the whole family's. Can you imagine starting a relationship over with your adult children? Well, that's exactly what Elena had in mind. Elena's first step was to set clear boundaries. As psychologist Carl Rogers once said, she decided that she would no longer be the one to solve all her children's problems. The strange paradox is that if I accept myself as I am, I can change. She gave it to her children. Stopping constant interference gives you the opportunity to grow. When Elena announced her new rules, the reactions were mixed. Louise the artist was perplexed, Anna the lawyer was relieved, and Carlos the aspiring chef was initially reluctant, but Mum, you've always been there for us. Elena protested, then replied with a smile, I always will be, but in a different way. When Elena faced the first difficulties, she stuck to this idea. There were moments of doubt and tension, but she remained firm in her decision. One day, Anna called in desperation because she had an important case, but instead of offering a resolution, she lost it in court. Elena asked, Do you think you can learn from this experience? This simple question led to a deep dialogue between mother and daughter, strengthening their relationship in ways Elena could never have imagined. In her theory of growth mindset, psychologist Carol D.W. states that a person's true potential is unleashed when they grow up. Elena put this idea into practice, and her children began to develop resilience and self-confidence over time. Elena began to notice significant changes in those who had previously relied on her for decision-making. To Elena's surprise, Carlos began inviting her over for dinner and cooking elaborate meals himself. One day, he brought tears of joy to her eyes. The University of Michigan found that young people with strong parents have higher life satisfaction. Elena saw these results firsthand for her own children. This change wasn't easy or quick. But a year after Elena decided to change her attitude towards her children, every little bit of progress was a victory. The change in the family was noticeable. Her son Carlos, who had temporarily moved in with her, now lived in his own apartment, and Anna was thriving. Elena, a perfect aspiring lawyer, had discovered her true passion for psychology and was pursuing a master's degree in family therapy. And Ruish, a frustrated artist, was now playing in a local band that was becoming increasingly popular. But the changes didn't stop there. It was the insight that made this act so important that, as psychologist Carl Rogers once said, strengthened the family bond in ways she could never have imagined, about setting healthy boundaries and encouraging independence. Elena learned this lesson the hard way, but the results spoke for themselves. Family dinners that were once full of tension and veiled comparisons became moments of real connection at such gatherings. Ruish said with a laugh, "Remember when my mother claimed I was going to be the next Picasso? Well, I turned out to be more like Mick Jagger. Van Gogh and I couldn't be happier." This new family dynamic not only improved personal relationships, but also helped Carlos with his marketing strategy, for example, by using her knowledge of psychology. Elena finally understood the deeper meaning of the word and found a more authentic and fulfilling way to be a mother, empowering her children to find their own path. A Harvard study found that young people who grew up in environmental experiments that promoted autonomy and responsibility were 40% more likely to have high levels of life satisfaction. Elena witnessed these results firsthand, but perhaps the most important change occurred in Elena herself. She no longer felt responsible for solving all of her children's problems or running their lives, but instead, she became someone's source of support and wisdom, and her children looked to her for advice, but not for magic solutions. The gift I can give my children is not money, possessions, or instant solutions, but self-confidence, the ability to face their own challenges, and the assurance that I will always support them. But it wasn't. This change to live her life for her was not easy. There were moments of doubt, there were heated arguments, there were tears, but as psychologist Viktor Frankl once said, when we cannot change the situation, we challenge ourselves to change ourselves, and precisely to change Elena and her family. We learned that it is not about making unlimited money, giving possessions, solving all problems, but about giving one-sided advice, comparing children, having unreasonable expectations. The real gift is to teach children autonomy and responsibility while giving them love. As psychologist Abraham Maslow said, the healthiest way to raise a child is to allow them to develop their individuality. Think of your own family. Give your children tools that they can fly and grab. Put them in a golden cage. And remember that true love is not about doing something. If you've made it this far, write your true love in the comments so we can know who the winner is. Watch the video until the end. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the channel. We will notify you of more content like this in the future, so please share this video with your loved ones so they can start putting the wisdom into practice today.